The day I discovered my children had signed over my family home to Vanessa, their stepmother and my ex-husband's former secretary, was the day I stopped believing in family loyalty. For 30 years, I'd nursed dying patients back to health, put both my children through college, and kept our home running while my husband built his business. And how did they repay me? By handing over the keys to the woman who destroyed my marriage. What they didn't know was that I had something, none of them expected, something that would turn their perfect little betrayal upside down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this at 62. When you spend your life taking care of others, you never imagine they'll turn around and treat you like you're disposable. But that's exactly what happened to me, Helen Carter. For nearly 3 decades, I worked as a pediatric nurse at Boston Memorial Hospital. I specialized in the oncology ward, where the children faced battles no child should ever have to fight. The night shifts were brutal, the emotional toll was worse, but I never complained. Not when Thomas had soccer tournaments that I'd rush to after double shifts. Not when Amanda needed help with science projects after I'd spent 12 hours on my feet. Not when Richard needed me to host dinner parties for potential clients while I was running on 3 hours of sleep. "You're a miracle worker, Helen," my friends would say. "I don't know how you do it all." The truth is, I didn't either. I just did what needed to be done. Richard was building Carter Enterprises from the ground up, and someone needed to keep our home and family intact. So I became the glue, making lunches, attending parent-teacher conferences, driving carpools, all while working full-time in one of the most demanding nursing positions at the hospital. Our colonial home in Lakeside Heights became my pride and joy. I planted every rosebush along the garden path with my own hands, selected every paint color, and spent weekends restoring the original hardwood floors myself to save money during the lean years. That house wasn't just a building, it was the physical manifestation of every sacrifice I'd made. When Thomas was accepted to Harvard Law, I picked up extra shifts to help with tuition. When Amanda wanted to study abroad in her junior year, I sold my grandmother's antique jewelry collection, the only inheritance I had, to make it happen. I never regretted it. Their futures were worth every sacrifice. "Mom, you didn't have to do that," Amanda had said when she found out about the jewelry. "Your education is more important than some old rings and necklaces," I told her. "They're just things. You're my future." I believed that with my whole heart. I thought they understood what I'd given up for them. I thought they valued it. When Richard's business finally took off in our 15th year of marriage, I was thrilled. Finally, all our hard work was paying off. But success changed him. The late nights at the office grew more frequent. The business trips multiplied. I noticed the slight scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts when I did laundry. "You're imagining things," he'd say when I mentioned it. "You're just exhausted from those hospital shifts. Maybe it's time you cut back." I didn't cut back. Our kids were in college, expenses were mounting, and someone needed to keep saving for the future. Richard was spending more and more: a new car, expensive watches, lavish client dinners. Someone needed to be practical. In our 22nd year of marriage, Richard hired Vanessa Mitchell as his executive assistant. She was barely 40, with a business degree and ambition that matched his own. I met her at the company Christmas party, where she shook my hand and said, "Helen, Richard talks about you constantly. It's so impressive how you've managed to stay relevant in nursing at your age." The backhanded compliment stung, but I smiled, politely. I was 59, not ancient. 6 months later, Richard sat me down in our kitchen. The kitchen I'd remodeled myself the previous summer. "Helen, this isn't working anymore," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've grown apart. I think we both deserve a chance at happiness in our remaining years." "Remaining years?" I echoed. You make it sound like we're on our deathbeds. You know what I mean, he said impatiently. I'll always care for you, but I need more. I need passion and understanding. I didn't ask if Vanessa was providing these things. I already knew. What I didn't know was how quickly everything would unravel. The divorce was finalized in record time. Richard was generous with the settlement, or so my attorney said. I kept the house in Lakeside Heights, plus a modest alimony payment. Richard would continue paying for Thomas's final year of law school. It seemed fair, on paper. What the settlement didn't account for was the emotional fallout. Thomas and Amanda were adults when the divorce happened, 28 and 25 respectively. But they still took sides, and to my shock, they didn't take mine. Dad's been unhappy for years, Mom, Thomas told me over coffee one afternoon. You were always at the hospital, always putting patients first. I was working, I said, stunned by his perspective. Someone had to pay the bills and save for your education. Dad was working too, Amanda chimed in. He built a whole company, while you were gone all those nights. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Had they forgotten the soccer games I'd attended with dark circles under my eyes? The school lunches I'd prepared after night shifts? The second job I'd taken to pay? For Amanda's study abroad program? 3 months after the divorce, Richard married Vanessa in a lavish ceremony in the Bahamas. My children attended. I saw the photos on social media, both of them smiling beside their father and his new bride, who was draped in a designer gown. That probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Dr. Patricia Wells, my supervisor and mentor at the hospital, was the only one who seemed to understand my pain. They're blinded by the glamour of it all, Helen, she said as we shared tea in her office. Richard's living the high life now, and they want to be part of that. They're not seeing the decades of sacrifice you made. They're adults, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. They can make their own judgments. Perhaps, Patricia said thoughtfully. But sometimes even adults need to be reminded of the truth. I continued working at the hospital, pouring myself into my patients even more than before. The children on the oncology ward didn't judge me for my age or question my sacrifices. They just appreciated the extra time I spent reading to them, the way I remembered their favorite snacks, the gentle touch I'd developed over decades of practice. What I didn't tell anyone, not even Patricia, was that I'd been quietly making a name for myself in pediatric oncology nursing. Over the years, I'd developed several innovative care protocols that significantly improved quality of life for young cancer patients. I'd written articles in medical journals under a pseudonym, not wanting to draw attention away from the doctors. I'd served as a consultant on difficult cases at other hospitals, again keeping a low profile. Dr. Wells knew about some of it, but not the extent. She'd been encouraging me for years to publish under my own name, to seek recognition for my contributions. You're too modest, Helen, she'd say. You've revolutionized several aspects of pediatric oncology care, but no one knows it was you. The improvements speak for themselves, I'd reply. That's all that matters. The truth was, I'd always put my family's needs and feelings ahead of my own professional recognition. Richard had always been sensitive about his status, and I didn't want to risk outshining him in any way. So I kept my accomplishments quiet, focusing instead on being a supportive wife and mother. When I turned 60, the hospital organized a small celebration for my 3 decades of service. Patricia presented me with a plaque and a card signed by the staff and many former patients. It was a touching gesture, but what meant even more was the letter I received that same day from the hospital board. In recognition of your outstanding contributions to pediatric oncology nursing, it read, we would like to offer you the position of Chief Nursing Officer for Pediatric Services. It was a prestigious role, one that came with a significant salary increase and would allow me to implement my care protocols across all pediatric departments. I called Thomas and Amanda immediately, eager to share my news. That's nice, Mom. Thomas said, sounding distracted. Listen, I can't really talk now. We're at Dad and Vanessa's place for dinner. Some potential investors are here. Oh, I said, deflated. Well, maybe we can celebrate this weekend? This promotion is a really big deal for me. This weekend is tough, he hedged. Vanessa's planning a boat trip to celebrate Dad's new product line. But maybe next month? I'll check my calendar. I hung up, feeling hollow. Thomas had always been career-focused like his father, but there was a time when he would have at least pretended to be excited about my achievements. Amanda's response wasn't much better. Wow, Mom, that's great. But aren't you getting a bit old for such a demanding position? I mean, you could retire now if you wanted. I don't want to retire, I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. I love my work. This is a chance to make an even bigger difference. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. If you say so, she replied. Just don't work yourself into the ground. It's not like you need the money anymore, right? But she was wrong. While the divorce settlement had seemed fair initially, Richard had found ways to reduce the alimony payments, claiming business downturns that I later discovered were fabricated. I didn't contest it. The legal fees would have eaten up any gains, and I was tired of fighting. So yes, I did need this promotion and the salary that came with it. What I didn't need, however, was the bombshell that dropped 3 months later. It was a crisp autumn Saturday when Thomas and Amanda asked to meet me for lunch. They'd been acting strange lately, missed calls, vague excuses, an underlying tension in our interactions. I thought perhaps they wanted to apologize for missing my promotion celebration. We met at a cafe near my house, the one I'd maintained for 30 years, the one I'd fought to keep in the divorce. Mom, Thomas began, looking uncomfortable, but determined. We need to talk to you about the house. What about it? I asked, setting down my coffee cup. Well, Amanda jumped in, you know it's really big for just one person, and the maintenance must be such a burden at your age. At my age? I repeated, feeling a familiar sting. I'm 62, not 92, and I manage the maintenance. Just fine. Thomas cleared his throat. The thing is, Mom, we've been talking with Dad and Vanessa about this. They're expanding their family. Expanding their family? I interrupted. Vanessa is pregnant? The thought of my ex-husband starting a new family in his 60s with his former secretary made me feel slightly ill. No, Amanda said quickly. But they're planning to adopt. Vanessa has always wanted children, and there's this sibling group, 3 young kids who need a home. That's commendable, I said cautiously, unsure where this was heading. But they need more space, Thomas continued. Their current place is beautiful but too small for 3 children. And since you're alone in that big house... My blood ran cold as I finally understood what they were leading up to. You want me to sell my house to Richard and Vanessa? I asked incredulously. They exchanged glances before Amanda spoke. Not exactly, Mom. We've already taken care of it. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. What paperwork? I demanded, my voice rising despite the public setting. The house transfer, Thomas said, his lawyer voice kicking in. After some discussion, we determined that the most logical solution was to transfer ownership of the house to Dad and Vanessa. They'll be moving in next month. I stared at them, momentarily speechless. You determined? You transferred? That house is in my name. You can't transfer what isn't yours. Thomas had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Actually, Mom, remember when you were hospitalized briefly last year for that bout of pneumonia? You signed a power of attorney form so we could handle your affairs while you recovered. A temporary medical power of attorney, I clarified, anger building in my chest. The document was broader than you realized, he admitted. It gave us authority to manage your assets in your best interest. And you determined that giving A way my home was in my best interest. I was practically shaking now. It makes financial sense, Amanda argued. The property taxes and maintenance costs are eating into your retirement savings. This way, you can downsize to something more appropriate and invest the difference. What difference? I asked coldly. If you gave away my house, where's the money from the sale? More uncomfortable glances between my children. It wasn't exactly a sale, Thomas admitted. More of a family transfer. But don't worry, Vanessa found you a really nice senior apartment complex. It's got activities, dining services, everything you need. A senior apartment complex, I repeated flatly. You're putting me in a retirement home? It's not a retirement home, Amanda protested. It's an active adult community. And it's only 15 minutes from the hospital, so you can still work if you insist. If I insist? I could barely recognize my own children in that moment. I'm the chief nursing officer of pediatric services at one of the top hospitals in Boston. Of course I'm going to continue working. Mom, be reasonable, Thomas said, using his negotiating voice. This is the best solution for everyone. The kids need a stable home, and you need something more manageable. What I need? I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the floor, is for my children to respect me and my property. That house is mine. I worked for it. I maintained it. It's not yours to give away. It's done, Mom, Amanda said firmly. The paperwork is filed. Vanessa has already started measuring for renovations. I looked at them, these two people I'd raised, nurtured, sacrificed for, and saw nothing of myself reflected back. In that moment, they were strangers, wearing familiar faces. When am I expected to vacate my home? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You have 30 days, Thomas replied. But the apartment will be ready next week so you can move whenever you're ready. How generous, I said, gathering my purse. Don't expect me at Sunday dinner anymore. In fact, don't expect anything from me at all. I walked out of the cafe with my head held high, but once inside my car, the modest sedan I'd purchased after the divorce, I finally allowed the tears to fall. 30 years of memories, erased with a signature. 30 years of sacrifice, dismissed as irrelevant. But beneath the grief, something else was building, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Anger. And with that anger came a sudden clarity. I'd spent my entire life playing by the rules, putting others first, staying humble about my accomplishments. Where had it gotten me? Betrayed by my husband, abandoned by my children, and about to be evicted from my own home. As I drove back to the house that apparently no longer belonged to me, I made a decision. I wasn't going down without a fight. For once in my life, I was going to put myself first. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the colonial facade I'd lovingly maintained for decades. Every shutter had been painted by my hand. Every flower bed had been planted during precious free weekends. This wasn't just a house. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work. And somehow, through legal manipulation, my own children had taken it from me. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. Patricia? It's Helen. I need your help. And I think it's finally time I published those articles under my real name. The battle for my home and my dignity had just begun. Dr. Patricia Wells listened intently as I explained the situation over tea in her elegant Cambridge home. Unlike my stark, active adult apartment with its generic beige walls and industrial carpeting, Patricia's historic Victorian had character and warmth, much like its owner. They used a power of attorney to transfer your house? Patricia's voice rose in disbelief. Helen, that sounds highly questionable, legally speaking. I nodded, clutching my teacup tightly. Thomas claims it was within the scope of the document I signed. He's a lawyer, so I assume he found some loophole. A loophole or not, it's Morally reprehensible. Patricia set her cup down with unusual force. You need your own attorney, one who isn't afraid to go up against your son. I've already called someone, I admitted. James Wilson. He specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Elder law? You're hardly elderly, Helen. That's not how my children see it, I said bitterly. According to them, I'm 1 foot in the grave, incapable of maintaining my own home or making my own decisions. I'd spent the past week packing up 30 years of memories, sorting through photographs, children's artwork, holiday ornaments, deciding what could fit in my new miniature living space and what I'd have to discard. Each item I touched brought back memories. Thomas's high school graduation tassel, Amanda's first ballet slippers, the serving platter Richard and I had received as a wedding gift. My life, reduced to boxes and black garbage bags. Have you confronted Richard about this? Patricia asked. He won't take my calls, I replied. His assistant, not Vanessa, a new one, says he's unavailable whenever I phone. I sent an email, and all I got was a formal response expressing regret for any misunderstanding and assuring me that the transition would be handled professionally. Patricia snorted. Professionally? There's nothing professional about stealing your home. According to Thomas, they're doing me a favor. The apartment complex has amenities I couldn't possibly manage without. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. Like what? A bingo hall? Patricia rolled her eyes. Precisely, along with water aerobics and weekly bus trips to the mall. I shook my head. Meanwhile, Vanessa has already hired contractors to modernize my kitchen. Apparently, my carefully restored 1920s cabinetry is depressingly vintage. Patricia's expression darkened. This is beyond disrespectful, Helen. It's predatory. I know, I said quietly. That's why I've decided to fight back. Good, Patricia leaned forward. What's your plan? I took a deep breath. First, I'm meeting with James Wilson tomorrow to explore my legal options. Second, I'm accepting the keynote speaker invitation for the International Pediatric Oncology Nursing Conference next month. Patricia's eyes widened. Helen, that's wonderful. You've turned it down 3 years running. Because I didn't want to draw attention to myself, I explained. But now? I think it's time the world knew exactly who developed the Carter Protocol for pain management in pediatric cancer patients. The protocol named after your ex-husband's company? Patricia clarified, a slow smile spreading across her face. The very same, I confirmed. Richard has been taking credit for funding that research for years, building his company's reputation on my work. He even named it after Carter Enterprises as a charitable contribution. But he didn't fund it. I developed that protocol on my own time, using my own resources, while working full-time and raising his children. Patricia looked thoughtful. The hospital has the documentation proving you're the sole developer. The board would back you up. They already have, I replied. When I told Administrator Jenkins about my situation, he was livid. Apparently, Richard has been leveraging his connection to the Carter Protocol to secure government contracts. For years, Jenkins is more than happy to set the record straight. This could damage Richard's business reputation significantly, Patricia pointed out. I'm counting on it, I said, with more steel in my voice than I'd ever allowed myself before. But that's not all. I've also decided to accept the research grant from the Wilkins Foundation. Patricia nearly spilled her tea. The $2 million grant? Helen, that's incredible. When did they offer it to you? 6 months ago, I admitted. I turned it down initially because I didn't want to uproot my life. I was comfortable in my house, happy with my routine. The grant requires relocating to their research facility in Rhode Island for at least a year. But now that you've been effectively evicted, now I have nothing holding me back, I finished. The Wilkins Foundation is renewing their offer, with an increased stipend for housing and a dedicated support staff. And they're adding something new. They want to name their pediatric pain management wing after me. Patricia beamed. The Helen Carter wing. It has a lovely ring to it. It does, doesn't it? I smiled for what felt like the first time in weeks. And it comes with a very public dedication ceremony next quarter. One that will be covered by medical journals and local news outlets. Your children will see it, Patricia realized. And Richard. And Vanessa, I added. Everyone who thought I was just a nurse, just a housewife, just an aging woman ready for a retirement home, they'll all see exactly what I've accomplished while they weren't paying attention. The next morning, I met James Wilson at his downtown office. Unlike Thomas with his slick corporate law firm, James operated a smaller practice focused on protecting vulnerable clients. His office was comfortable but unpretentious, lined with family photos and case law books. Mrs. Carter, he greeted me warmly, I've reviewed the documents you sent over. I'll be direct. What your children did falls into a gray area legally, but it doesn't look good. How gray are we talking? I asked. The power of attorney document is unusually broad, he explained, sliding a copy across his desk. Most medical POAs are limited to healthcare decisions during incapacity. This one includes provisions for property management that would typically be found in a financial power of attorney. I never intended to give them control over my house, I said firmly. I believe you, James nodded. And a judge might as well. The problem is proving you didn't understand what you were signing. You're a highly educated healthcare professional. No one's going to believe you couldn't comprehend a legal document. Thomas brought it to me in the hospital, I recalled. I had pneumonia, was on strong antibiotics, and had just received a breathing treatment. I was hardly at my sharpest. James made a note. That helps. Any witnesses? The hospital staff, I replied, and there should be medical records documenting my condition. Good, he nodded again. Now, about the transfer itself, there's something odd there too. Normally, a house sale generates funds that would go to you, but according to these documents, the property was transferred for a nominal fee of $1. $1, I repeated incredulously. My house is worth over $850,000. Exactly, James said grimly. That alone raises red flags about the intentions behind this transfer. It's one thing to sell a property on your behalf and give you the proceeds. It's another to essentially give it away to family members who directly benefit. So we have a case? I asked hopefully. We have grounds to challenge the transfer, he clarified. I won't promise victory, but I believe we can at least delay the process and possibly get the transfer invalidated. At minimum, we should be able to secure fair market compensation for your property. I don't want compensation, I said firmly. I want my house back. James looked sympathetic but cautious. Mrs. Carter, I understand your attachment, but if your son and ex-husband have already started renovations, then they've invested in a property they don't legally own, I finished. That's their problem, not mine. A hint of admiration flickered across James's face. You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Carter. I like that. Let's file for an emergency injunction today to halt any further renovations or move-in plans. That will buy us time to build our case. As I left James's office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since the divorce, I was taking control rather than simply reacting to circumstances others had created for me. I spent the next day at my new apartment, unpacking the few possessions I'd brought with me. The space was sterile and impersonal, a far cry from the warm, lived-in comfort of my colonial. The walls were white, the carpet beige, the appliances basic and dated despite the complex's claims of modern amenities. But it would do for now. This wasn't my home. It was just a temporary way station on the path to reclaiming what was mine. That evening, I received a furious call from Thomas. Mom, What is this injunction? He demanded without preamble. Dad and Vanessa were in the middle of kitchen demolition when they got served with papers. How unfortunate for them, I replied. Calmly. They shouldn't have started renovations on a house they don't legally own. This is ridiculous, Thomas snapped. You signed a legally binding power of attorney. The transfer is valid. That's for a judge to decide, I said. In the meantime, they should probably stop destroying my property. It's not your property anymore. Thomas's voice rose. Why are you being so difficult? We found you a nice place to live, close to the hospital. Most mothers would be grateful their children were looking out for them. Looking out for me? I echoed in disbelief. You took my home, the home I maintained for 30 years, and gave it to your father's new wife for nothing. How exactly is that looking out for me? You're twisting the situation, Thomas argued. The house was too big for you. The maintenance was becoming a burden. We made a practical decision. A practical decision would have been selling the house at market value and giving me the proceeds, I countered, not handing it over to Richard and Vanessa for $1. Thomas went quiet for a moment. Who told you it was $1? My attorney, I replied. And unlike you, he's actually representing my interests. Mom, be reasonable. Thomas's tone shifted to the condescending one he'd adopted since the divorce. Fighting this will only drain your savings on legal fees. Dad's corporate attorneys will bury your case in paperwork. Let them try, I said evenly. By the way, how is your father handling the news about the keynote address? What keynote address? Thomas sounded genuinely confused. The International Pediatric Oncology Nursing Conference next month, I explained. I'm the keynote speaker. I'll be discussing my development of the Carter protocol. You know, the pain management system your father's been taking credit for funding all these years. Silence stretched across the line. That's not possible, Thomas finally stammered. Dad developed that protocol through Carter Enterprises' research division. I laughed, genuinely amused by his ignorance. Is that what he told you? Carter Enterprises doesn't have a research division, Thomas. It never did. I developed that protocol independently, on nights and weekends, while working full-time and raising you and your sister. Your father simply took credit for it to enhance his company's reputation. I don't believe you, Thomas said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. You don't have to believe me, I replied. The hospital has all the documentation. So, does the medical board. So do the journals where I published my research under a pseudonym, because your father thought it would confuse clients if I became known for medical innovations while he was trying to build a healthcare supply business. Another long pause. If what you're saying is true, Thomas said slowly, why are you only bringing this up now? Because for 30 years I put my family's needs ahead of my own recognition, I explained. I let your father take credit because it helped his business, which supported our family. I published under a pseudonym to keep peace in our marriage. I downplayed my accomplishments so Richard's ego wouldn't be bruised. I took a deep breath before continuing. But now you've taken my home, dismissed my career, and treated me like an inconvenient elderly relative to be tucked away in a retirement community. So I've decided it's finally time to set the record straight. Mom, you need to think about what you're doing, Thomas warned. Dad's company could suffer if this goes public. I've thought about it very carefully, I assured him. In fact, I've been thinking about little else since you and your sister informed me you'd given away my house. I've made my decision. I ended the call and turned off my phone, unwilling to field the barrage of messages that would undoubtedly follow. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't considering how my actions would affect Richard or my children. I was thinking only of justice, and perhaps a small measure of righteous vengeance. The next morning, I met with Administrator Jenkins and the hospital's public relations team to prepare for the upcoming conference. As Chief Nursing Officer for Pediatric Services, I'd always kept a low profile, focusing on patient care rather than publicity. Now, I embraced the spotlight. "We'll need updated professional photographs," the PR director explained, "and a comprehensive biography highlighting your development of the Carter Protocol." "I'd like to rename it," I interjected. "The Carter name no longer reflects its origins." Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. "What would you prefer?" "The Helen Protocol," I said without hesitation. "Simple, direct, accurate." "Perfect," Jenkins smiled. "And while we're making changes, I've been in contact with the Wilkins Foundation about your research grant. They're thrilled you've reconsidered and are prepared to make a public announcement at the conference." "Excellent," I replied. "I'd also like to discuss launching a formal investigation into how Carter Enterprises has been using my protocol in their marketing materials without proper attribution." Jenkins looked surprised, but not disapproving. "That's a significant step, Helen. Are you certain you want to pursue it?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. "It's time for truth and transparency." Later that evening, I received a text from Amanda. "Mom, can we talk? Dad's freaking out about this conference thing." I replied simply, "I'm busy preparing my keynote address. We can talk after the conference." Her response came quickly. "This isn't fair to Dad or Vanessa. They've already started renovations on the house." I didn't bother responding. Let them worry. Let them wonder what else I might have up my sleeve. The following week passed in a blur of preparation. I worked with James on the injunction case, collaborated with the PR team on my conference presentation, and began organizing my research for the Wilkins grant. I barely had time to think about the apartment's depressing beige walls or the noisy neighbors who seemed to use their blender at 5 a.m. every morning. On Wednesday, I received an unexpected visitor at the hospital, Olivia Reynolds, my closest friend outside of work. We'd met years ago at a community garden and bonded over our shared love of heirloom tomatoes and classical music. Unlike many of my other friendships that had faded after the divorce, Olivia had remained steadfastly loyal. "I heard through the grapevine that you're taking on Richard and the kids," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "About time, if you ask me." I smiled at her bluntness. News travels fast. "Small circles," she shrugged. "Richard was at the country club yesterday, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. Apparently, some government contracts are in jeopardy because of questions about the origins of the Carter Protocol." "How unfortunate for him," I said mildly. Olivia laughed. "Helen Carter, I've known you for 15 years, and I've never seen this side of you. It's magnificent." "It doesn't feel magnificent," I admitted. "It feels terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I've never stood up to Richard like this, never stood up to anyone, really." "That's what makes it so powerful," Olivia leaned forward. "Listen, I have a proposition for you. My brother owns that beautiful craftsman house in Brookfield, the one with the gardens I showed you pictures of. He's been renting it out, but the tenants just left. It's empty and he's not in a rush to fill it." "Olivia, I can't afford—" She held up a hand. "I know your financial situation is complicated right now. Gregory is offering it to you at a fraction of the normal rent, just enough to cover the property taxes. He says it's the least he can do for the nurse who took such good care of his daughter during her leukemia treatment." I was stunned. Mia Reynolds had been one of my patients nearly a decade ago, a brave 7-year-old battling an aggressive form of leukemia. I'd spent countless extra hours with her, reading stories, explaining procedures, holding her hand through the worst of the treatments. I hadn't realized she was Olivia's niece. "Mia is in college now," Olivia continued, "studying nursing because of you. Gregory has never forgotten what you did for her." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I was just doing my job." "No," Olivia shook her head firmly. "You went far beyond your job. That's who you are, Helen. That's who you've always been. The person who gives more than required, who sacrifices without complaint, who puts others first." It's time someone put you first for a change. The Craftsman house in Brookfield was everything my sterile apartment wasn't. Warm, characterful, surrounded by gardens and filled with natural light. When Olivia took me to see it the following Saturday, I felt an immediate sense of peace despite the tumultuous circumstances of my life. "It's perfect," I whispered, running my hand along the built-in bookshelves. "And it's yours for as long as you need it," Olivia assured me. "Gregory insists." Moving again so soon was exhausting, but friends from the hospital helped, forming a caravan of cars filled with the boxes I'd barely had time to unpack at the apartment. By Sunday evening, I was settled in my new temporary home, feeling more centered than I had since the day Thomas and Amanda had informed me of their betrayal. Monday morning brought a development I hadn't anticipated. James called as I was preparing for work. "Mrs. Carter, Richard's attorneys have contacted me," he began without preamble. "They're proposing a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" I asked warily. "They're offering to buy the house from you at full market value, plus an additional $50,000 for inconvenience," James explained. "It's actually quite generous, financially speaking." I considered this for a moment. "And if I accept?" "You'd drop the injunction and any claims related to the unauthorized transfer," he clarified. "You'd also need to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the whole situation." "And the Carter Protocol? My keynote address?" "The offer doesn't mention those," James replied. "It's strictly about the house." I smiled to myself. Richard was trying to solve the most immediate problem, the injunction preventing his renovation work, while ignoring the larger threat to his company's reputation. Classic Richard, always treating symptoms rather than addressing root causes. "Tell them I'll consider the offer," I instructed James, "but I want to see the exact terms in writing." "Of course," James agreed. "I'll request the formal proposal today." That night, I received another call, this time from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a woman's voice I instantly recognized filled the line. "Helen, it's Vanessa. We need to talk." I considered hanging up but decided against it. "I have nothing to say to you, Vanessa." "Then just listen," she said, her usual, polished tone tinged with desperation. "This situation has gotten out of hand. Richard is beside himself about this conference and the questions being raised about the Carter Protocol." "How unfortunate for him," I replied evenly. "This isn't just about Richard," Vanessa insisted. "It's about the company, about jobs, about the adoption. If these government contracts fall through because of this dispute, we won't be able to provide the stable home those children need." "Are you actually trying to guilt me about orphaned children?" I asked incredulously. "After you took my home." "I didn't take anything," Vanessa protested. "Thomas and Amanda approached us with the idea. They said you were struggling to maintain the property, that you'd be better off in a senior community. And you believed that? Or did it just conveniently align with your desire for a larger home?" Vanessa sighed. "Helen, I know we've never been friends. I understand why you resent me, but surely we can resolve this like reasonable adults." "That before participating in the theft of my home," I said coldly, then ended the call. I sat in the quiet of the Craftsman house, listening to the distant sound of waves from the nearby coast. Vanessa's call had unsettled me, not because I felt guilty, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected. Richard and Vanessa were truly desperate. The pending adoption, the renovation work, the government contracts in jeopardy. They were vulnerable in ways I hadn't anticipated. Part of me, the nurturing caregiver who had defined my identity for decades, felt a pang of sympathy for the children waiting for a home. But another part, the newly awakened fighter determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine, recognized this as yet another manipulation tactic. They had taken everything from me without a second thought. Now they wanted me to consider their needs, to sacrifice yet again? No, This time, I would stand firm. This time, I would fight for myself with the same fierce determination I'd always shown when fighting for others. The conference was 2 weeks away. The court hearing on the injunction was, reasonable adults don't steal homes from women who spent 30 years building and maintaining them, I pointed out. Reasonable adults don't use a medical power of attorney to transfer property without consent. What if we found you another house? Vanessa offered. Something smaller but still nice in a good neighborhood? We could purchase it outright. Put it in your name. I don't want another house, I said firmly. I want my house, the one I earned, the one I loved, the one that holds 30 years of my memories. But we've already started renovations. Vanessa sounded genuinely distressed. The kitchen is completely gutted, the master bathroom too. Then you've invested in property you don't legally own, I replied, echoing what I'd told Thomas. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Helen, please. Vanessa's voice took on a pleading quality I'd never heard from her before. These children have been through so much already. The adoption agency is visiting next month to do a home study. If we're not settled by then, you should have thought about that before participating in the theft of my home, I said coldly, then ended the call. I sat in the quiet of the Craftsman house, listening to the distant sound of waves from the nearby coast. Vanessa's call had unsettled me, not because I felt guilty, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected. Richard and Vanessa were truly desperate. The pending adoption, the renovation work, the government contracts in jeopardy. They were vulnerable in ways I hadn't anticipated. Part of me, the nurturing caregiver who had defined my identity for decades, felt a pang of sympathy for the children waiting for a home. But another part, the newly awakened fighter determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine, recognized this as yet another manipulation tactic. They had taken everything from me without a second thought. Now they wanted me to consider their needs? To sacrifice yet again? No. This time, I would stand firm. This time, I would fight for myself with the same fierce determination I'd always shown when fighting for others. The conference was 2 weeks away. The court hearing on the injunction was scheduled for the following month. The Wilkins Foundation was preparing their public announcement about my research grant and the wing named in my honor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just Helen the nurse, Helen the mother, Helen the wife. I was Helen Carter, innovator, researcher, fighter. And I was just getting started. The morning of the International Pediatric Oncology Nursing Conference arrived with a crystalline autumn sky. I stood at the mirror in my bedroom at the Craftsman house, smoothing my new charcoal gray suit, a far cry from the practical scrubs I'd worn for decades. Patricia had insisted on taking me shopping, arguing that if I was going to step into the spotlight, I needed to look the part. You're not just a nurse today, she'd said as we browsed designer racks. You're a keynote speaker, a researcher, an innovator about to reclaim her rightful recognition. Now, studying my reflection, I barely recognized myself. The tailored suit accentuated a confidence I was still growing into. My silver-streaked hair had been styled in an elegant bob, rather than my usual practical ponytail. Small pearl earrings, a gift from Olivia for the occasion, completed the transformation. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Car will pick you up in 20 minutes. Ready to make history? I smiled and replied, as ready as I'll ever be. The conference was being held at the Harrington Medical Center, Boston's newest and most prestigious healthcare facility. As my hired car pulled up to the gleaming glass entrance, I spotted news vans and photographers, more media presence than these conferences typically attracted. Dr. Jenkins arranged for additional press coverage, explained Emily, the hospital's PR coordinator who met me at the entrance. The story of the Helen Protocol is generating significant interest. The Helen Protocol, I repeated, still getting used to the name. It sounds strange after all these years. It sounds right, Emily assured me. And wait until you see the presentation materials. The research team has put together a comprehensive history of your work, including the documentation proving your sole authorship. We walked through the bustling conference center, where hundreds of healthcare professionals from around the world had gathered. I recognized many faces, colleagues, former students, researchers who had built upon my early work. Several stopped to congratulate me, their expressions a mix of admiration and curiosity about why I had remained in the background for so long. In the presenters' lounge, I found Patricia waiting with Administrator Jenkins and several board members from the hospital. Their presence underscored the significance of today's events. Helen, Jenkins stepped forward to shake my hand. Today is long overdue. The board has unanimously approved a formal statement correcting the historical record regarding the development of the pain management protocol. Thank you, I said. Sincerely. I appreciate the hospital's support. It's the least we can do, he replied. In fact, there's something else we'd like to discuss after your keynote. A new position we believe would be perfect for you. Before I could inquire further, Emily approached to inform us it was time to take our seats in the main hall. As we made our way through the crowded corridors, I caught sight of a familiar face that stopped me in my tracks. Amanda, looking uncomfortable in the sea of medical professionals. Our eyes met across the busy hallway. She made a small, uncertain gesture, not quite a wave, more of a recognition. I nodded briefly but continued walking with Patricia and Jenkins. Whatever Amanda wanted, it could wait until after my presentation. The main conference hall was filled to capacity, with over 1,000 attendees seated and more standing along the walls. A large screen behind the podium displayed the conference logo, alongside the Helen Protocol, Revolutionizing Pain Management in Pediatric Oncology, in bold letters. Dr. Eliza Montgomery, the conference chair and a respected figure in pediatric medicine, opened the proceedings with a warm introduction. For decades, a revolutionary approach to pain management has improved the quality of life for countless young cancer patients worldwide. Today, we have the honor of hearing directly from its creator, a dedicated healthcare professional whose innovative work has remained largely uncredited until now. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Helen Carter. The applause was thunderous as I approached the podium. I scanned the audience, spotting Amanda in the back row, and, to my surprise, Thomas seated near the middle, his expression inscrutable. I wondered if Richard was somewhere in the crowd as well, watching as his carefully constructed narrative began to unravel. Thank you, Dr. Montgomery, I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. For 30 years, I've worked as a pediatric oncology nurse. Like many of you, I've held the hands of children facing unimaginable pain. I've comforted parents in their darkest hours, and I've searched constantly for ways to make the unbearable slightly more bearable. I paused, taking a breath before continuing. 25 years ago, I began developing what became known as the Carter Protocol, a comprehensive approach to pain management that considers not just physical symptoms, but emotional and psychological factors as well. I developed this protocol during night shifts, on weekends, at my kitchen table after my children had gone to bed. I tested it, refined it, documented its efficacy, and eventually published my findings under the pseudonym E.J. Marcus. I clicked to advance the slides, revealing the original research notes, dated, signed with my initials. For various personal reasons, I allowed this work to be credited to Carter Enterprises as a charitable initiative. I remained in the background as the protocol gained recognition and was implemented globally. Today, I'm here to reclaim my work and to set the record straight. For the next 45 minutes, I detailed the development of the protocol, the science behind it, and the documented results from thousands of cases. I shared stories of patients whose quality of life had improved dramatically, illustrated the protocol's evolution over time, and presented the extensive evidence supporting its efficacy. Throughout my presentation, I maintained a professional tone, never directly attacking Richard or Carter Enterprises. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth, about intellectual honesty, and about finally receiving recognition for work that had helped countless children. As I concluded, the applause was even louder than before, with many attendees rising to their feet. Dr. Montgomery returned to the podium, visibly moved. "Helen, on behalf of the International Pediatric Oncology Nursing Association, I am honored to present you with our Lifetime Achievement Award," she announced, unveiling a crystal plaque I hadn't known was coming. "Your work has changed the standard of care worldwide and improved the lives of children when they needed it most." Tears pricked at my eyes as I accepted the award. This recognition, from peers who understood the importance of the work, meant more than I could express. Following the keynote, there was a scheduled press conference where I would field questions about the protocol and formally announce my acceptance of the Wilkins Foundation grant. As I made my way to the media room, Amanda intercepted me in the hallway. "Mom," she said, her voice tight with emotion, "can we talk? Just for a minute?" I glanced at Emily, who nodded understandingly. "You have 5 minutes before the press conference," she said, stepping aside to give us privacy. Amanda's carefully applied makeup couldn't fully conceal her reddened eyes. "Was that all true?" she asked. "Did you really develop that protocol yourself? Did Dad really take credit for all those years?" "Every word was true," I confirmed. "The hospital has all the original documentation." "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Amanda's voice cracked slightly. "We would have been so proud." "Would you?" I asked gently. "Or would you have seen it as me competing with your father, taking attention away from his business achievements?" Amanda looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "But finding out like this in front of hundreds of people—" "Mom, do you have any idea what this will do to Dad's company?" "I imagine the same thing it did to me when I discovered my children had signed away my home. It will force some difficult reckonings." Amanda winced. "About the house. Thomas said it was the right thing for everyone, that you'd be safer, in a community with support services. And you believed him," I said. Not a question, but a statement. "You never questioned whether it was what I wanted, whether it was even legal." "I thought," she faltered. "Thomas is the lawyer. He said the paperwork was legitimate." "The paperwork may have been legal in the strictest sense, but the intent behind it wasn't," I explained. "You can't use a power of attorney to enrich yourselves at my expense. That's financial exploitation, Amanda." She paled at the term. "That's not what we were trying to do." "Perhaps not consciously," I conceded, "but the effect is the same. You took something of immense value, financial and emotional, from me without my consent, and gave it to your father and Vanessa." Emily approached discreetly, tapping her watch to indicate our time was up. "I have to go," I told Amanda. "The press is waiting." "Mom, please." She reached for my arm. "Can't we fix this? Vanessa says they'll buy you another house, anywhere you want." "This isn't about another house," I said firmly. "This is about respect, about autonomy, about recognizing that at 62, I'm still capable of making my own decisions." I gently removed her hand. "I'm sorry, Amanda, but I'm done allowing others to determine my worth and my future. If you want to make things right, you need to start by acknowledging what you did was wrong, not just inconvenient in light of recent developments." The press conference was a blur of cameras, microphones, and rapid-fire questions. I announced my acceptance of the Wilkins Foundation grant and the naming of the Helen Carter Wing for pediatric pain management. I confirmed that I had developed the protocol independently and explained my decision to step forward now. "For decades, I prioritized others' needs above my own recognition," I stated. Today marks a new chapter where I can fully embrace my contributions to pediatric medicine. When a reporter asked directly about Carter Enterprises' claims regarding the protocol, I responded carefully. I can only speak to the factual record, which clearly documents my development of this approach. The hospital board has issued a formal statement correcting the historical record, which I believe speaks for itself. By the time I returned to the Craftsman house that evening, I was physically and emotionally exhausted, but filled with a sense of accomplishment I'd rarely experienced. Patricia and Olivia had organized a small celebration dinner, joined by James Wilson, who arrived with news. "The story is everywhere," he announced, placing several newspapers on the coffee table. Medical journals, business publications, even mainstream news outlets. "Nurse reclaims groundbreaking medical protocol after decades in shadow" is the headline in the Boston Globe. "Any response from Richard or Carter Enterprises?" I asked, scanning the front pages. Their PR team issued a vague statement about reviewing historical records and acknowledging all contributors to the protocol's development, James replied. But the damage control is already failing. 2 government agencies have suspended contract negotiations pending verification of the company's claims, and their stock dropped 8% by closing. "And the house?" I prompted. James smiled. "That's the best part. Richard's attorneys called late this afternoon with a new offer. They'll reverse the transfer completely, return the house to your name, and pay for all restoration of the renovations they've started." "No financial settlement?" Olivia asked. Surprised. "They offered that too," James confirmed, "but they've dropped the non-disclosure requirement. They know that ship has sailed." "What changed?" I wondered. "Reality," Patricia said simply. "Richard built his business reputation on being the philanthropist behind this protocol. Now that narrative is unraveling publicly, he's scrambling to minimize further damage." "There's something else," James added. "Thomas has recused himself from representing his father in this matter. Apparently, there are concerns about conflicts of interest, given his role in the original transfer." "He's distancing himself," Olivia observed. "Or developing a conscience," I suggested, though without much conviction. The following morning brought another unexpected visitor, Thomas himself, standing awkwardly on the porch of the Craftsman house with a thick folder under his arm. "May I come in?" he asked formally when I opened the door. I hesitated but stepped aside. We settled in the living room, morning sunlight streaming through the bay windows. "I've been reviewing the power of attorney situation," he began, opening the folder. "There are irregularities I wasn't fully aware of when we executed the transfer." "Irregularities?" I repeated. "The document you signed was quite broad, but not unlimited," he explained. "Specifically, it required that any property transfers be in your best financial interest. A $1 transfer to family members clearly doesn't meet that standard. You're just realizing this now?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm saying it officially now. As an attorney, I have ethical obligations I can't ignore, regardless of family connections." "And what about your obligations as a son?" I asked quietly. He closed the folder, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "I convinced myself we were doing what was best for you. The house was large, you were living alone, and Vanessa kept talking about how you'd struggle as you got older. It seemed logical to have you in a community with support services. Did it ever occur to you to ask what I wanted?" "No," he admitted. "And that was wrong. I'm sorry, Mom." His apology surprised me. Thomas had always been more like his father, finding it nearly impossible to admit mistakes. "The house transfer will be reversed this week," he continued. "Dad has agreed to pay for complete restoration of any renovation work and to cover all your legal expenses." "Just like that?" "Not exactly," Thomas sighed. "Dad's company is in serious trouble over the protocol situation. Several contracts are hanging in the balance. His attorneys have advised that fighting you on the house would only generate more negative publicity. So this isn't about doing the right thing, I clarified. It's about damage control. For Dad, yes, Thomas nodded. For me, it's more complicated. Seeing you at that conference yesterday, hearing about everything you'd accomplished while raising us, while supporting Dad's career, it made me question a lot of assumptions. He hesitated before continuing. Amanda and I were raised hearing about Dad's business genius, his charitable contributions, how he supported medical research. We never knew that research was actually yours. Your father and I had an unspoken arrangement, I explained. He built his business. I supported him privately and publicly. In return, he provided financial security for our family. But that arrangement didn't include him taking credit for your work, Thomas pointed out. No, I agreed. That evolved gradually. At first, it was just allowing the protocol to be named after Carter Enterprises because they'd made a small donation to the hospital. Then it became Richard mentioning our support of innovative pain management research in interviews. Eventually, he was being introduced at events as the man behind the Carter Protocol. And you never corrected anyone? I shook my head. By then, the narrative was established. Challenging it would have created tension in our marriage and confusion in his business relationships. It seemed easier to let it stand. Thomas looked troubled. Mom, that's not right. You deserved recognition for your work. Yes, I said simply. I did. But for 30 years, I chose family harmony over professional recognition. That was my choice. What wasn't my choice was having my home taken from me by the children I'd sacrificed for. Thomas winced. I know it doesn't fix things, but I am truly sorry. I got caught up in what Dad and Vanessa wanted, in their plans for the adoption. I lost sight of what was right. His mention of the adoption reminded me of Vanessa's desperate call. What's happening with the children they plan to adopt? The home study has been postponed, Thomas replied. With everything up in the air about the house and Dad's company, the agency suggested waiting until things stabilize. A part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for the children waiting for a home, but I reminded myself that Richard and Vanessa's choices had created this situation, not mine. I should go, Thomas said, rising. The attorneys will be in touch about reversing the house transfer. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I was proud of you yesterday. What you've accomplished is incredible. After he left, I sat on the porch swing, processing our conversation. Thomas's apology seemed genuine, but it had come only after public revelations had forced a reckoning. Would he have ever recognized the wrong without that catalyst? I couldn't be sure. My phone rang. Jenkins from the hospital. Helen, I hope I'm not interrupting, he began. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about a new position. Of course, I replied. What did you have in mind? The board has approved creation of a new role, Director of Innovation in Pediatric Care, he explained. It would involve overseeing research initiatives, mentoring staff on developing new care protocols, and representing the hospital at conferences and in publications. We want you for the position. That sounds significant, I said carefully. It is, Jenkins confirmed. It comes with a substantial salary increase, a dedicated research budget, and flexibility to work with the Wilkins Foundation simultaneously. In essence, we're acknowledging that your contributions deserve more than your current role allows. I'm honored, I said sincerely. When would this start? As soon as you're ready, he replied. Though I understand you have some personal matters to resolve first. Yes, I agreed. The house situation is moving toward resolution, but there will be details to address. Take the time you need, Jenkins assured me. The position will be there when you're ready. Later that afternoon, James called with an update. The transfer reversal papers are ready, he announced. We can sign them tomorrow. Richard and Vanessa have already signed their portion. So quickly? I was surprised by the speed. Richard's attorneys are pushing to resolve this before it generates more negative press, James explained. Also, they've included a formal apology acknowledging that the original transfer was executed without your full understanding or consent. Will I need to see Richard and Vanessa at the signing? I asked, unsure how I felt about facing them. No, James assured me. They've completed their part separately. You'll just meet with me and the notary at my office. Good, I said, relieved. What about the renovation damage? They've agreed to pay for complete restoration, James confirmed. They've already contacted contractors who specialize in historical homes. The next day, I signed the papers in James's office, officially reclaiming ownership of my home. It should have felt like an unmitigated victory, but my emotions were more complex. Yes, I had won. My house was mine again. My professional contributions were finally recognized, and my future suddenly held exciting new opportunities. But the relationships with my children remained damaged, perhaps irreparably so. As I drove to Lakeside Heights to inspect the renovation damage, I found myself reflecting on the past month's whirlwind of events. I had gone from feeling powerless and betrayed to standing in my professional power and reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The cost had been high. Family relationships strained, Richard's business reputation damaged, and adoption potentially delayed. But was it too high? Had my pursuit of justice veered into vengeance? I pulled into the familiar driveway, steeling myself for what I might find inside. The contractor Richard had hired, Martin Dyer, met me at the door. Mrs. Carter, he greeted me respectfully. I understand you'd like to review the current state of the property before we begin restoration work. Yes, I confirmed. I need to see everything. The tour was both better and worse than I'd feared. The kitchen had been completely gutted, my carefully restored cabinets removed, the vintage tile I'd lovingly maintained ripped out, the breakfast nook where I'd served countless family meals demolished. The master bathroom had suffered a similar fate. The clawfoot tub I'd refinished myself was gone, replaced by a half-installed modern shower enclosure. Can it be restored to its original condition? I asked Martin as we stood amid the demolition. Yes, he assured me. We specialize in historical homes. I've seen the before photos, and we can recreate everything down to the cabinet handles. Mr. Carter has authorized whatever expenditure is necessary to restore it properly. How long will it take? 6 to 8 weeks, Martin estimated. Would you like to be consulted on all the details, or would you prefer we work from the historical photos? I'd like to be involved, I decided. This house has been my life's work alongside my nursing career. Every detail matters to me. As I was leaving, I noticed a car pulling up, Amanda's electric blue compact. She stepped out, looking uncertain. About her welcome. I thought you might be here, she said, approaching cautiously. Thomas told me the transfer was being reversed. It's official as of this morning, I confirmed. Can we talk? She asked. Please? We walked to the stone bench in the front garden, the bench Richard and I had placed there when we first bought the house, where I'd sat reading stories to Thomas and Amanda when they were small. I don't know where to start, Amanda admitted. I've been thinking about everything. The house, your work with the protocol, all those years you supported us while Dad took credit for your research. It's a lot to process, I acknowledged. Why didn't you fight back sooner? She asked. Why let Dad claim your work for all those years? For the same reason I worked night shifts to pay for your study abroad program, I said gently. For the same reason I sold my grandmother's jewelry to fund your education, I put my family's needs and feelings above my own. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. And we repaid you by taking your house. Yes, I said simply. You did. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered. I got caught up in what Thomas and Dad were saying, that you were getting older, that the house was too much for you, that you'd be better off in a community with support. I never stopped to think about what you actually wanted. That's the heart of it, I agreed. You all decided what was best for me without ever asking me. You treated me as though I was incapable of making my own decisions. We were wrong, Amanda acknowledged. Seeing you at that conference, hearing what you'd accomplished, I barely recognized you, Mom. You've always been just Mom to me, making dinner, working at the hospital, supporting us from the background. I never saw you as a groundbreaking researcher, someone important enough to have medical wings named after them. I'm both, I told her. I'm the mother who made your lunches and checked your homework, and I'm the nurse who developed a pain management protocol that's helped countless children. Neither diminishes the other. What happens now? Amanda asked hesitantly. With us, I mean. That depends, I said honestly. I'm not the same person I was a month ago, Amanda. I've rediscovered parts of myself that I set aside for decades. I'm accepting new professional opportunities, embracing recognition I've earned. Our relationship needs to evolve to accommodate who I am now. Not just your mother, but a woman with her own achievements and agency. I'd like that, Amanda said quietly. I'd like to know this version of you. I reached over and squeezed her hand, not fully ready to forgive, but willing to open the door to a new understanding. As we sat there on the stone bench, surrounded by the garden I'd tended for decades, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. The house would be restored, my professional contributions recognized, my future filled with new opportunities. The relationships with my children remained complicated, but perhaps not beyond repair. Most importantly, I had finally learned to stand up for myself with the same fierce determination I'd always shown when advocating for my patients. That revelation, that belated understanding of my own worth, was perhaps the most valuable outcome of this painful journey. The autumn sun warmed my face as I looked toward the house, my house, with its gutted rooms that would soon be restored. Like the house, I too had been damaged, but was finding my way back to wholeness, transforming in the process into something both familiar and new. Tomorrow, I would meet with the Wilkins Foundation about the research wing bearing my name. Next week, I would begin my new role as Director of Innovation in Pediatric Care, and in between, I would supervise the restoration of my beloved home, ensuring that every detail honored its history while accommodating my future. For the first time in decades, I was living life on my own terms, not as anyone's wife, not primarily as anyone's mother, but as Helen Carter, in full possession of her accomplishments, her property, and her power. The Wilkins Foundation headquarters occupied a renovated textile mill along the Providence waterfront. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river, filling the space with natural light that danced across polished hardwood floors. I sat in a conference room with Dr. Eleanor Wilkins, herself, a legendary figure in pediatric medicine and the Foundation's founder. Helen, I cannot tell you how pleased we are that you've reconsidered our offer, Dr. Wilkins said, sliding a portfolio across the table. After your keynote address, our board voted unanimously to increase the grant funding by 20%. The publicity surrounding your work has only reinforced what we already knew. You're the foremost expert in pediatric pain management. I opened the portfolio, scanning the updated terms. $2.4 million over 3 years, a dedicated research team, state-of-the-art facilities, and housing accommodations in a Foundation-owned property near the research center. This is incredibly generous, I said, genuinely moved by the Foundation's commitment. It's well-deserved, Dr. Wilkins assured me, and frankly, long overdue. I've followed your work for years, even when it was published under a pseudonym. I looked up in surprise. You knew? She smiled knowingly. The medical community is smaller than people realize, especially in specialized fields. Your writing style, your methodologies, they were distinctive. I suspected E.J. Marcus was a pen name, though I respected your choice to remain anonymous. I never imagined my work was being tracked that closely, I admitted. That's because you've consistently undervalued your contributions, Dr. Wilkins observed. A common pattern among women in medicine, particularly those of our generation. Our generation. The phrase resonated. Dr. Wilkins was in her late 60s, only a few years older than me. She'd built her reputation in an era when female physicians were still rare, when they had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Now, about the wing dedication, she continued, turning to architectural renderings. The Helen Carter Wing for Pediatric Pain Research will occupy the east section of our main building. Construction is already underway, with completion scheduled for spring. The renderings showed a beautifully designed space, light-filled treatment, rooms, research laboratories, consultation areas, and a central atrium. At the entrance, a plaque bearing my name. It's overwhelming, I confessed. After decades of working behind the scenes, seeing my name so prominently displayed feels surreal. You'll get used to it, Dr. Wilkins said with a warmth that suggested she understood exactly what I was experiencing. Recognition can be as disorienting as it is gratifying when you've spent a lifetime avoiding the spotlight. We spent the next hour discussing the research agenda, my plans to expand the Helen protocol to address different types of pediatric pain, potential applications in non-oncology settings, training programs for implementing the protocol in resource-limited environments. This is exceptional work, Helen, Dr. Wilkins said as we concluded. I particularly appreciate your focus on making these techniques accessible in underserved communities. Pain doesn't discriminate by socioeconomic status, I replied. Neither should treatment approaches. As I prepared to leave, Dr. Wilkins asked a question that caught me off guard. The recent publicity, your children transferring your home, your ex-husband claiming credit for your work, has that affected your enthusiasm for this project? I considered my answer carefully. Initially, I accepted this grant partly out of anger, a desire to prove my worth to those who had devalued me. But now, I'm embracing it for myself. The personal situation has accelerated my professional journey, but it doesn't define it. Dr. Wilkins nodded approvingly. That's exactly what I hoped to hear. Righteous anger can be a powerful catalyst, but it's a poor foundation for sustained work. Finding your own intrinsic motivation ensures longevity. Driving back to Brookfield, I reflected on our conversation. Dr. Wilkins had articulated something I was only beginning to understand: the difference between reaction and intention. Was I still reacting to Richard, Thomas, and Amanda's betrayal? Or was I finally acting from my own centered sense of purpose? The answer became clearer as I pulled into the driveway of Olivia's brother's craftsman house. This temporary home had become a sanctuary, a place where I was learning to prioritize my own needs and ambitions. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions without first calculating their impact on everyone else in my orbit. That evening, I received a call from Martin Dyer, the contractor handling my house restoration. Mrs. Carter, I wanted to update you on our progress, he began. We've completed the demolition phase and are ready to begin rebuilding. I have some options for the kitchen cabinetry that I'd like you to consider. I thought we were restoring it to the original design, I said, confused. That's certainly an option, Martin confirmed. But since we're starting fresh, I thought you might want to consider alternatives that maintain the historical aesthetic while incorporating modern functionality. I hadn't considered this possibility, that restoration didn't necessarily mean exact replication. Perhaps this house, like my life, could honor its history while evolving into something new. I'd like to see the options, I decided. When would be convenient? We arranged to meet the following morning at the house. After hanging up, I noticed a text message from Amanda. Mom, can I join you at the house tomorrow? I'd like to help. with the restoration decisions if that's okay. Her request surprised me. Amanda had never shown interest in home restoration before, dismissing my passion for historical architecture as quaint and old-fashioned. Was this a genuine interest, or an attempt to work her way back into my good graces? Either way, I decided to accept the olive branch. Martin is coming at 10 a.m. You're welcome to join us. The next morning dawned bright and crisp, a perfect New England fall day. I arrived at the house early, wanting time alone to process my feelings before Amanda and Martin arrived. The front garden needed attention. Summer blooms had faded, and fallen leaves carpeted the walkway. In previous years, I would have spent October weekends preparing the garden for winter, planting bulbs for spring, mulching the perennial beds. The sound of a car door closing interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Amanda walking up the path, carrying 2 coffee cups. "I brought your favorite," she said, offering me one of the cups. "Hazelnut latte, extra shot, no whip." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched that she remembered my coffee preference. Small gestures mattered, especially now. "The garden looks sad," Amanda observed, glancing around at the untended beds. "It's been a difficult month," I replied. "Gardening hasn't been my priority." "I could help," she offered hesitantly. "I know I've never been much of a gardener, but you could teach me. Maybe this weekend?" The offer caught me off guard. Amanda had always been determinedly urban, preferring concrete to compost, high-rise apartments to homesteading. Her sudden interest in gardening seemed out of character. "Why the sudden interest in getting your hands dirty?" I asked, more curious than suspicious. Amanda looked down at her polished boots, clearly uncomfortable. "I've been seeing a therapist," she admitted. "Since the conference, since seeing what I did to you. She suggested that learning about your interests might be a way to rebuild." Her honesty disarmed me. "I'd like that," I said softly. "The garden has always been my sanctuary. Sharing it with you would be nice." Martin arrived moments later, carrying portfolios of design options and material samples. We moved inside to the gutted kitchen, where he spread everything across a folding table set up in the center of the room. "As you can see, Mrs. Carter, these 3 options maintain the craftsman style of your original cabinetry," he explained, showing us detailed drawings. "But each incorporates modern features: soft, close drawers, pull-out shelving, integrated lighting." I studied the designs, appreciating how they honored the home's character while offering practical improvements. "These are beautiful, Martin. Could I have some time to consider them?" "Of course," he agreed readily. "There's no rush on the decision. We'll be focusing on structural elements for the next 2 weeks anyway." After Martin left, Amanda and I continued studying the designs, discussing the merits of each option. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in months, perhaps years. No undercurrents of judgment, no subtle power dynamics, just 2 adults considering cabinetry designs. "You know, Mom," Amanda said hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what you said, about us making decisions for you without asking what you wanted. I didn't understand at the time how wrong that was." I waited, giving her space to continue. "Growing up, you always put everyone else first. You worked those brutal night shifts, then came home and made our lunches, helped with homework, kept the house running. You never complained, so I guess I never thought about the toll it took. I just assumed that's what mothers did, sacrifice endlessly without recognition." "It's a common assumption," I acknowledged, and for decades I reinforced it by never asserting my own needs. "But that wasn't fair to you," Amanda insisted, "and it set a terrible example for me. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of woman I want to be, what kind of life I want to build. I always thought Dad's career-focused, ambitious approach was the model to follow. But watching you speak at that conference, seeing how you've Built this whole second act for yourself after everything that happened. It's made me reevaluate a lot of things." Her words touched something deep within me, a recognition that perhaps my greatest legacy wouldn't be the Helen Protocol or a research wing bearing my name, but the impact my journey might have on my daughter's understanding of her own worth. "I spent too many years letting your father define success," I told her. "Don't make the same mistake. Define it for yourself." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I'm trying to do, starting with making amends to you." Over the next few weeks, a new routine emerged. I split my time between preparing for my new roles at the hospital and the Wilkins Foundation, consulting on the house restoration, and tentatively rebuilding my relationship with Amanda. Each Saturday, she would join me at the house for what we started calling garden therapy, clearing beds, planting bulbs, learning the rhythms of nurturing growing things. Thomas remained more distant, though he called regularly to check on the house restoration progress. His apology had seemed sincere, but I sensed he was still struggling to reconcile his legal and filial obligations. I gave him space, understanding that some bridges take longer to rebuild than others. Richard, unsurprisingly, communicated only through his attorneys. The initial damage to Carter Enterprises' reputation had been significant. Stock values dropped, contracts suspended, media scrutiny intensified. However, as the weeks passed, his PR team began crafting a new narrative. Richard as the supportive ex-husband who had championed his wife's work behind the scenes, who had named the protocol after his company as a gesture of corporate support for her research. It was revisionist history at its finest, a spectacular example of turning lemons into lemonade. I could have disputed this narrative but chose not to. Richard's desperate scramble to salvage his reputation held no interest for me anymore. I had reclaimed my house, my professional identity, and my autonomy. Those victories were enough. Vanessa, however, proved less willing to accept the new status quo. 4 weeks after the house transfer reversal, as I was leaving the hospital after a meeting about my new position, I found her waiting by my car. "Helen," she called, stepping forward. "Can we talk? Please?" She looked different from the polished, confident woman who had stolen my husband and attempted to claim my home. Her designer clothes hung looser on her frame, and dark circles shadowed her eyes despite careful makeup application. "What is there to say, Vanessa?" I asked, not unkindly, but with clear boundaries. "A lot, actually," she replied, her usual smooth assurance missing. "Could we go somewhere? A coffee shop, maybe?" Curiosity won out over reluctance. We walked to a nearby cafe, settling at a corner table away from other patrons. "The adoption fell through," Vanessa said without preamble, her hands clenching around her coffee cup. The agency cited instability in the home environment and concerns about financial security following the publicity about Richard's company. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Whatever my feelings toward Vanessa, the children caught in this situation deserved stability and love. "Are you?" she asked, a hint of her old sharpness returning. "It's what you wanted, isn't it? To punish us?" "No," I replied firmly. "Contrary to what you might believe, dismantling your adoption plans was never my goal. I simply wanted my house back and recognition for my work." "Your work," Vanessa repeated. "Do you have any idea what the fallout has been for Richard? For the company? For our lives?" "I imagine it's been significant," I acknowledged. "But those consequences weren't my doing. They were the natural result of years of misrepresentation." Vanessa stared into her coffee. "Richard is not handling it well. The board is questioning his leadership. Investors are nervous. Some days he doesn't even get out of bed." I felt a complicated wave of emotions. Not satisfaction at Richard's suffering, but a sort of detached recognition that his current struggles were of his own making. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Because I don't know what to do, Vanessa admitted, vulnerability breaking through her carefully maintained facade. Everything is falling apart. The adoption, the company, our marriage. Your marriage? This surprised me. Richard isn't the man I thought I married, she said bitterly. When things were going well, when he was the respected businessman and philanthropist, he was charming, confident, generous. But now? He's angry all the time, drinking too much, blaming everyone but himself. The description was painfully familiar. Glimpses of a Richard I had seen during our marriage when business deals fell through or competitors gained advantages. The charismatic exterior masking a fundamentally insecure man who couldn't cope with failure or criticism. "What do you want from me, Vanessa?" I asked directly. She looked up, her expression unexpectedly vulnerable. "Advice, I suppose. You were married to him for 25 years. You must have strategies for handling his moods, his blame shifting." The request was so unexpected that I nearly laughed. Vanessa, the younger, more polished woman who had replaced me, was now asking for advice on managing the very man she had taken from me. My strategy was sacrifice, I told her honestly. I minimized my own achievements, absorbed his criticisms, worked tirelessly to maintain a home and family he could showcase. I don't recommend it. "But you stayed for 25 years, she persisted. "At what cost?" I countered. "I published research under a pseudonym to protect his ego. I let him take credit for my professional innovations. I silenced my own voice to amplify his. That's not advice, Vanessa. That's a cautionary tale." She was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know," she finally said. "About the protocol, about your research. Richard always talked about it as his company's initiative." "I'm sure he did," I said, neither accusatory nor forgiving, simply stating a fact. "You must hate me," Vanessa said quietly. "I did," I admitted, "for taking my husband, for disrupting my children's loyalty, for attempting to claim my home. But hate requires energy I'm no longer willing to expend on situations I can't change." "So what do you feel now?" I considered the question carefully. Compassion, perhaps. You're learning what I discovered over 25 years, that Richard's love and approval are conditional, that his confidence is a veneer hiding profound insecurity. Vanessa blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "I was Richard's executive assistant, then his wife, prospective, adoptive mother, lady of the house, and now everything is slipping away." Her words echoed my own journey, the disorientation of losing roles that had defined me, the terrifying freedom of rebuilding an identity based on my own values rather than others' expectations. "Perhaps that's your opportunity," I suggested, gently, "to discover who Vanessa is beyond her relationship to Richard." She looked at me with something approaching respect. "How did you do it? Start over at our age?" "One step at a time," I replied. I focused on what brought me genuine satisfaction: my work, my garden, my home. I accepted help from true friends. I learned to advocate for myself with the same vigor I'd always shown when advocating for others. We sat in silence for a few minutes, two women united briefly by our shared experience of the same complex, difficult man. "Thank you," Vanessa said finally, "for talking to me, for not turning me away." "We've all been casualties of Richard's ego in different ways," I observed, "but we don't have to remain casualties forever." As we parted outside the cafe, Vanessa hesitated, then asked, "The house restoration, how is it coming along?" "Slowly, but surely," I replied. "The kitchen and bathroom will be finished by Christmas." "I'm glad," she said, and seemed to mean it. "It was always your house, never mine. I see that now." Watching her walk away, I felt an unexpected lightness. The conversation had provided a closure I hadn't realized I needed, not just regarding Vanessa, but Richard as well. His struggles, his company's difficulties, even his marriage. None of it was my responsibility anymore. I was free to focus on my own journey without the weight of his needs and demands. That freedom became even more apparent the following week when I met with the hospital board to formalize my new position. The contract they presented exceeded my expectations: a generous salary, research budget, administrative support, and, most importantly, complete autonomy over program development. "We want to be clear, Helen," Jenkins said as I reviewed the terms. "This isn't a consolation prize or a gesture of sympathy following recent events. This position was created specifically to leverage your expertise and vision. Your work deserves institutional support at the highest level." "I appreciate that clarification," I said, signing the contract with a newfound confidence. "And I look forward to building something truly impactful." As December approached, the house restoration neared completion. The kitchen had been beautifully rebuilt with custom cabinetry that honored the original design while incorporating modern conveniences. The master bathroom now featured a replica of my beloved clawfoot tub alongside updated fixtures. Painters had matched the original wall colors exactly, and specialized craftsmen had repaired the damaged woodwork. Amanda continued our weekend gardening sessions, though we'd moved indoors for the winter, focusing on planning the spring garden and caring for houseplants I'd brought from the craftsman house. Our relationship had evolved into something new, not the old mother-daughter dynamic where I sacrificed and she received, but a more balanced friendship between two adult women who were learning to appreciate each other's strengths. Thomas remained more peripheral, though he had begun sending thoughtful texts and occasional emails, articles related to my research, information about legal protections for intellectual property, once even a rare first edition of a nursing textbook I'd mentioned studying in my early career. Small olive branches, tentatively extended. 2 weeks before Christmas, Martin announced that the restoration was complete. "The house is ready for you to move back in whenever you'd like, Mrs. Carter," he said during our final walkthrough. Stood in the center of my restored kitchen, running my hands along the smooth countertops, opening and closing the perfectly balanced cabinet doors. Everything was familiar, yet subtly improved, like finding an old favorite sweater that had been carefully mended and cleaned. "It's perfect," I told him. "You've done remarkable work." "It was an honor," he replied sincerely. "Restoring a home with this much history, this much love in it. That's the kind of project that makes my job worthwhile." Later that evening, I called Olivia to share the news. "The house is finished," I told her. "I can move back whenever I'm ready." "That's wonderful," she said warmly. "When do you think you'll go?" I hesitated, surprising myself. "That's the strange thing. I'm not sure I want to, at least not right away." "Really?" Olivia sounded surprised. "After everything you went through to get it back?" "I know it seems odd," I admitted, "but the Craftsman House has become a symbol of my new beginning. The Colonial holds 30 years of memories, most good, some painful. I'm not sure I'm ready to re-immerse myself in that history just yet." "So what are you thinking?" Olivia asked. "I'm considering waiting until after I complete the first phase of the Wilkins Foundation work," I explained. "I'll be in Rhode Island 3 days a week anyway. Maybe splitting my time between the Colonial and the Craftsman House makes sense for now." "That sounds like a practical solution," Olivia agreed. "And Gregory is delighted to have you stay. As long as you like. He says you're the perfect tenant. Quiet, clean, and you've improved his garden beyond recognition." We laughed together, and I felt a deep gratitude for friends like Olivia who had supported me unconditionally through this tumultuous period. She had offered sanctuary when I needed it most, practical help without judgment, and unwavering belief in my right to stand up for myself. The following Saturday, I invited both Thomas and Amanda to meet me at the Colonial. They arrived separately, but within minutes of each other, both looking apprehensive about why I had called them together. "The house restoration is complete," I told them as we sat in the living room. "I wanted you both to see it and to discuss my plans moving forward." "It looks amazing," Amanda said, glancing around at the perfectly restored space. "Exactly like it was before, but somehow better?" "Martin did exceptional work," I agreed, "but I've decided not to move back in immediately." Thomas looked concerned. "Is something wrong with the restoration?" "No, nothing like that," I assured him. "The house is perfect. But my life has changed significantly in the past few months. I'm starting new professional roles, dividing my time between Boston and Providence. The Craftsman House in Brookfield has become a sanctuary for me, a place associated with my new beginning rather than my past." "So you're selling this house after all?" Amanda asked, clearly confused. "No," I smiled, understanding their uncertainty. "I'm keeping it. This house represents 30 years of my life, my hard work, my memories. I fought for it because it's rightfully mine, but I've decided to use it differently for now." I explained my plan, to maintain ownership of the Colonial, but convert part of it into a residence for medical fellows at Boston Memorial, particularly those working in pediatric oncology who couldn't afford Boston's exorbitant housing costs. The master suite would remain my private space for when I needed to be in Boston for hospital work, while the rest of the house would provide affordable housing for promising young healthcare professionals. The hospital's legal team is drafting the necessary agreements, I concluded. They'll manage the property day to day, handling maintenance and tenant issues. The fellows will get below-market housing in a lovely neighborhood, and I'll have the satisfaction of supporting the next generation of healthcare providers. Thomas and Amanda exchanged glances, clearly surprised by this unexpected solution. "That's really generous, Mom," Thomas said. "Are you sure it's what you want?" "I'm sure," I confirmed. "This house deserves to be filled with life, with purpose. And I can think of no better purpose than supporting young professionals dedicated to healing." "What about us?" Amanda asked softly. "This has always been our family home." "It still is," I assured her. "Your rooms will remain private, available whenever you visit. Nothing changes in that regard." "But everything else has changed," Thomas observed, not critically but reflectively. "Yes," I agreed. "Everything has. And that's not entirely a bad thing, is it?" As we sat in the living room, the space where we had celebrated birthdays, opened Christmas presents, shared countless family dinners, I felt a sense of completion. The battle for my home had been won, but the victory wasn't about bricks and mortar. It was about reclaiming my voice, my agency, my right to determine my own path. The Colonial would always be part of my story, but it was no longer the entirety of it. My future stretched before me, rich with professional opportunities, new relationships, evolving family dynamics. For the first time in decades, that future was entirely of my own design. "No," Amanda said finally, answering my question. "It's not a bad thing at all. It's just different. But different can be good." "Different can be very good," I agreed, looking around at the home I had fought so hard to reclaim, now transformed into something that served not just my needs, but the greater good as well. Different, but entirely mine to decide. Spring came. To New England in its usual fitful manner, warm, promising days followed by sudden frosts, bursts of color retreating under unexpected snow. I divided my time between the Craftsman House in Brookfield and my suite at the Colonial, now officially a residence for medical fellows. The arrangement had proven even more successful than I'd anticipated. The young doctors and researchers brought a vibrant energy to the old house, filling it with passionate discussions about treatment protocols and patient care, discussions that often continued late into the evening on the back porch where I had once sat alone watching fireflies. Dr. Maya Chen, a brilliant pediatric oncology fellow from California, had become something of a protégé. She occupied Thomas's old room and had transformed it with plants, colorful textiles, and walls covered in medical journals and research notes. When I stayed at the Colonial, we often shared morning coffee before heading to the hospital, discussing cases and research ideas with an intellectual camaraderie I found deeply satisfying. "I've been reviewing your early papers on the Helen protocol," Maya told me one April morning as we sat in the kitchen nook. "Your approach was revolutionary, even then, but I think there's potential to expand it for adolescent patients with chronic conditions beyond cancer." "I've had similar thoughts," I admitted, pleasantly surprised by how our thinking aligned. Chronic pain management in teenagers presents unique challenges. Their developing brains, hormonal fluctuations, psychosocial factors. Exactly. Maya's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Plus, teenagers are notoriously non-compliant with traditional pain management regimens. They need approaches that give them agency, that fit into their complex social dynamics. "Write up a proposal," I suggested. "The Wilkins Foundation has expressed interest in expanding the protocol's applications. This could be a perfect avenue to explore." Maya beamed at the opportunity. Later, as we walked together to the hospital, I reflected on how different my life had become in just 6 months. Instead of being devalued and dismissed, my expertise was now actively sought. Instead of diminishing myself to protect others' egos, I was mentoring the next generation of medical innovators. The Helen Carter wing at the Wilkins Foundation was nearing completion, with the dedication ceremony scheduled for early summer. The research team had already begun preliminary work in temporary facilities, making significant progress on adapting the protocol for different patient populations. My position as Director of Innovation in Pediatric Care at Boston Memorial complemented this research perfectly, providing clinical settings to implement and refine our approaches. My relationship with Amanda had evolved into something I wouldn't have thought possible 6 months earlier. Our weekend gardening sessions had expanded to include cooking lessons. Amanda had expressed interest in learning the family recipes she'd always enjoyed, but never bothered to learn. "I've been eating takeout 5 nights a week since college," she confessed one Saturday as we prepared my grandmother's lasagna. "It never seemed important to learn cooking when I was focused on my career, but watching you balance your professional achievements with these personal skills, it's made me reconsider what success really looks like." Thomas remained more reserved, though our interactions had grown less strained. He had left Richard's corporate law firm to start his own practice, focusing on patient advocacy and healthcare rights, a move that surprised everyone, including himself. "Dad thinks I've lost my mind," he told me during a rare lunch together. "He says I'm throwing away a guaranteed partnership track to chase idealistic nonsense." "And what do you think?" I asked, curious about this unexpected career pivot. Thomas considered the question seriously. "I think I'm finally doing work that matters. Representing corporations in liability disputes never felt right, but I followed that path because it was expected. Watching you reclaim your professional identity, stand up for your work, it made me question whether I was living according to my own values or someone else's expectations." His words touched me deeply. Perhaps the most meaningful outcome of my painful journey wasn't the professional recognition or the reclaimed property, but the ripple effect it had created in my children's lives, challenging them to examine their own choices and priorities. Richard remained a peripheral figure, communicating primarily through attorneys and occasionally through Thomas. Carter Enterprises had stabilized somewhat after the initial scandal, though it never fully recovered its former prestige. Richard had been forced to step down as CEO but remained on the board in a diminished capacity. According to Thomas, he had sold the luxurious downtown condo he'd shared with Vanessa and moved to a smaller property in the suburbs, a significant downsize from his former lifestyle. Vanessa had filed for divorce, surprising no one after our candid conversation months earlier. She had returned to school to complete a master's degree in business administration, a goal she'd abandoned years ago when she became Richard's executive assistant. We occasionally exchanged polite emails, a strange postscript to our formerly antagonistic relationship. "I'm focusing on who I want to be without defining myself through a man," she wrote in her most recent message. "Your advice that day in the cafe changed my perspective more than you know." One sunlit May afternoon, as I tended the Colonial's front garden while staying in Boston for a week of hospital meetings, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Richard stepped out, looking noticeably older than when I'd last seen him. The confident posture and immaculate appearance that had once been his trademark had given way to slightly stooped shoulders and casual clothes that lacked his former precision. "Hello, Helen," he said, approaching cautiously. "Your garden looks beautiful, as always." "Thank you," I replied, straightening up from where I'd been planting new perennials. "What brings you here, Richard?" He gestured vaguely toward the house. "Thomas mentioned your arrangement with the medical fellows. It's not what I expected you to do with the property." "No, I imagine it isn't," I agreed, peeling off my gardening gloves. "May I?" he asked, indicating the stone bench. Nearby, I nodded, joining him on the bench where I'd sat with Amanda months ago, the bench where we'd once read bedtime stories to our young children on summer evenings. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Richard began, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "About our marriage, about the protocol, about everything that happened with the house." I waited, neither encouraging nor discouraging his reflection. "I was wrong," he said finally. "Taking credit for your work, allowing the children to transfer your house. It was wrong on every level." The admission, delivered without qualifications or excuses, surprised me. Richard had never been one to acknowledge mistakes, let alone apologize for them. "What brought about this realization?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Therapy," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "After everything fell apart, the company problems, Vanessa leaving, Thomas suggested I might benefit from professional help. I initially dismissed the idea, but eventually, well, let's just say desperation can be motivating. I'm glad you sought help," I said sincerely. "That takes courage." "My therapist helped me see patterns I've repeated throughout my life," Richard continued, "always needing to be the most successful, the most admired person in the room. Taking credit for others' work. Surrounding myself with people who reinforced my inflated self-image." He looked toward the house, the home we had shared for decades. "I never appreciated what you contributed, Helen. Not to our family, not to my career, not even to the business successes I claimed as my own. You were the foundation that made everything else possible, and I treated you as an afterthought." His words articulated what I had felt for years, but never expected him to recognize, let alone acknowledge. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you deserve to hear it," he replied simply. "And because part of my recovery is making amends where possible. I don't expect forgiveness, Helen. I don't even expect you to care about my journey at this point. But I needed to say it nonetheless." We sat in silence for several minutes, the spring breeze rustling through the garden I had tended for 3 decades. "I am sorry for the pain I caused," Richard finally said, standing to leave. "And I'm proud of what you've accomplished, what you're continuing to accomplish. It's what you always deserved." I watched him walk to his car, a modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicle he'd always insisted on driving, and felt a complex wave of emotions. Not love or longing, not even anger anymore, but a kind of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. The dedication ceremony for the Helen Carter wing at the Wilkins Foundation took place on a perfect June day. The modernist glass and wood addition gleamed in the summer sunlight, a physical manifestation of how far I'd come from the day my children had informed me they'd given away my home. Amanda and Thomas attended the ceremony, sitting in the front row alongside Patricia, Olivia, and other friends and colleagues who had supported me through the difficult transition. Even Maya and several other medical fellows had made the trip to Providence, their presence a testament to the community I had built in my new role. Dr. Eleanor Wilkins presented me with a ceremonial key to the wing, her eyes bright with shared triumph. Helen Carter's work has transformed how we understand and treat pediatric pain, she told the assembled guests and media representatives. This facility will ensure that her innovations continue to evolve and reach children worldwide. As I stepped to the podium to deliver my remarks, I caught sight of Amanda and Thomas in the audience. Amanda was smiling broadly, while Thomas watched with quiet pride. They were seeing me as I truly was, not just their mother, but a professional whose work held value beyond the domestic sphere. Pain is universal, but suffering need not be, I began. 30 years ago, when I developed what is now known as the Helen Protocol, I was driven by a simple but powerful observation. Children experiencing pain needed approaches that addressed their unique psychological, emotional, and physiological realities. I spoke about the protocol's development, its implementation globally, and the exciting new applications we were exploring. I thanked the Wilkins Foundation for their support, my colleagues for their collaboration, and my friends for their encouragement. And then, departing from my prepared remarks, I addressed something more personal. Life rarely follows the path we expect, I said, looking directly at my children. 6 months ago, I faced a profound betrayal that shook the foundations of how I saw myself and my place in the world. But from that painful experience came an unexpected gift, the opportunity to reclaim not just my professional contributions, but my sense of self-worth and autonomy. After the ceremony during the reception in the atrium of the new wing, Amanda approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, that was incredible," she said, embracing me warmly. "I'm so proud of you, and so sorry for my part in what happened. Seeing all this, the wing with your name, the respect everyone here has for your work, it's made me realize how little I understood about who you are beyond being my mother." "That's not entirely your fault," I told her gently. For years, I defined myself primarily through my roles as wife and mother. I minimized my professional accomplishments, downplayed my contributions. I taught you and Thomas by example that a woman's value lies in what she gives to others, not in what she achieves for herself. "Well, you're teaching us something very different now," Amanda said with a smile. Later, as guests toured the new facilities, Thomas found me by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. "You know, Mom," he said, "I keep thinking about something Dad used to say whenever he talked about his business success. He always claimed it was about seizing opportunities and refusing to be held back." "I remember," I nodded, familiar with Richard's self-congratulatory mantras. "The irony is," Thomas continued, "you're the one who actually lived those principles. When we tried to take your house, you didn't just accept it as an inevitable part of aging. You fought back. When your work was attributed to Dad's company, you reclaimed it. You seized opportunities like the Wilkins grant and the hospital position." "I suppose I did," I agreed, seeing the parallel for the first time. I watched Dad lash out when his carefully constructed image was threatened. Thomas reflected. "But you rebuilt, reimagined, created something new and meaningful from the pieces. That's real strength, real resilience." His insight touched me deeply. I had never thought of myself as particularly strong or resilient. Those were qualities I had attributed to more outwardly successful people like Richard. But Thomas was right. Facing betrayal, rebuilding my life, reclaiming my professional identity, finding new purpose, those actions required a core strength I hadn't recognized in myself until recently. Summer transitioned to fall, and my dual life between the craftsman house and the Colonial settled into a comfortable rhythm. The medical fellows program thrived, with a waiting list of applicants hoping for a spot in what had become known as Dr. Carter's Academy, an unofficial but affectionate nickname for the unique living and learning environment we had created. Maya's proposal for expanding the Helen protocol to adolescents with chronic conditions had secured funding from both the hospital and the Wilkins Foundation. We were building a dedicated team, with Maya as the project lead under my guidance. Watching her confidence grow as she stepped into leadership reminded me of my younger self, the passionate nurse who had worked nights and weekends developing the original protocol. Amanda had made good on her interest in gardening, transforming the small balcony of her downtown apartment into an urban oasis of container plants and vertical gardens. She had also begun dating a pediatric surgeon from the hospital, a thoughtful, unpretentious man who valued her marketing expertise and encouraged her growing interest in healthcare communications. Thomas had successfully established his patient advocacy practice, focusing primarily on helping families navigate complex medical systems and insurance challenges. He occasionally consulted with me on cases involving pediatric patients, our professional collaboration healing some of the residual tension from the house transfer incident. On a crisp October day, exactly 1 year after Thomas and Amanda had informed me they had given away my house, I sat in the garden of the Craftsman House, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 12 months. From the depths of betrayal and loss, I had emerged into a life more fulfilling and authentic than anything I had experienced in decades. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Dr. Wilkins. "Helen, I have some news I wanted to share personally," she began. "The International Medical Association has announced the recipients of this year's Global Impact Award." I listened, speechless, as she explained that the Helen Protocol had been recognized with medicine's highest honor for patient care innovation. The award would be presented at a ceremony in Geneva in December, with global media coverage and a substantial grant to further the work. They're specifically citing the protocol's adaptability across cultural contexts and resource settings, Dr. Wilkins continued. "The committee was particularly impressed by how you've structured it to be implemented even in facilities with limited technological capabilities." After we hung up, I remained in the garden, watching golden leaves drift from the maple trees surrounding the property. The Global Impact Award, an honor I had never dreamed of receiving, recognition at the highest level of my profession. I thought about the contrast between this moment and where I had been a year ago. Devastated by my children's betrayal, evicted from my home, my professional contributions attributed to my ex-husband's company. The transformation seemed almost unbelievable. Yet it wasn't magic or miracle that had created this new reality. It was a series of deliberate choices, the decision to fight for my home, to reclaim my professional work, to accept opportunities I had previously declined, to prioritize my own needs alongside others. As twilight settled over the garden, I made a final decision that had been forming in my mind for months. The Craftsman House, initially a temporary refuge, had become home in ways the Colonial never could be again. This place represented my rebirth, my reclamation of self, my new beginning. Tomorrow I would call Olivia's brother Gregory and ask about purchasing the property. The Colonial would continue its new purpose as a residence for medical fellows, with my suite always available when hospital work required me to be in Boston. But this peaceful Craftsman House, with its garden views and quiet dignity, would be my primary home moving forward. The journey had come full circle. I had fought for my original house not because I needed to live there, but because it represented everything that had been taken from me without consent. My agency, my autonomy, my right to determine my own path. Having reclaimed it, I was now free to choose where and how I truly wanted to live. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I felt a profound sense of peace. The betrayal that had once seemed devastating had ultimately liberated me from decades of self-effacement. In trying to cast me aside, my children had inadvertently pushed me into the spotlight where my work could finally be recognized. In attempting to decide my future for me, they had catalyzed my reclamation of self-determination. The house, my house, was exactly where it should be. In my name, serving a purpose I had freely chosen. And I was exactly where I needed to be. Fully myself at last. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.